It's coming. All right. It's on you.
Go.
Live.
All right, perfect. Hello and welcome to the Lost Confederacy channel. This is, we're in week 12 now, almost the end of this week's third fiscal quarter. And here, as always, we focus more so on that first letter in the acronym APOW, which is American. Going to do some things a little different. Get a little feedback. Let me see here.
That's probably me. Let me mute.
Okay. This here. So today we're just going to start off with just reiterating what we kind of highlighted last week in regards to, you know, the Oath Keepers, them openly coming out and just showing that, you know, not only your police officers, politicians, judges, they're all pretty much infiltrated. They all have members of the militia groups. This one in particular, the Oath Keepers. But again, this is just one of many. So again, just to kind of drill that home, just going to play this short clip, about 5 minutes, to again just show that proof of claim.
Membership list from a year ago, which finds there were hundreds of names on it of current or former elected official, law enforcement officers, and members of the military. The Oath Keepers are a far-right militia group, multiple members of which stormed the United States Capitol during the insurrection and that attack on January 6th. For more on this new report, CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, joins us now. Jonathan, thanks for being with us. So take us through the report that you all did, how you got your hands on the list, and what were some of the more troubling aspects of what you found?
Sure. Thank you for having me this morning, Willie. And I will tell you, this is a chilling report, the likes of which we've never released before. Last September, ADL analysts were able to get our hands on a data leak of the Oath Keepers membership rolls. There were 38,000 names that were essentially pulled from their records and put out in the open. Our analysts pulled down the information before the Oath Keepers could pull it back. We used open source techniques, including public records, social media, and other methods to review every single name that we found. And I must say, we thought the Oath Keepers were a threat when they rampaged through the Capitol on January the 6th, but we had no idea just how deep the threat truly is. We found hundreds of active law enforcement members who are part of the Oath Keepers, 10 chiefs of police, 11 sheriffs, dozens and dozens of active members of the US military, some 80 individuals who were running for public office, almost 24 of whom made it through the primaries and will be up this fall. And look, you might not know all of these names. Many people might know Arizona State Senator Wendy Rogers, who still, months after the terror attack at the Capitol, proudly proclaimed that she was an Oath Keeper and supported the group. But I'm talking about a county commissioner in Nevada, a town justice in New York, a firearms instructor in Pittsburgh, a pastor in North Carolina, and it goes on and on and on. These are individuals with access and influence. These are individuals with resources and training. And these are individuals who have shown us they are willing to commit acts of sedition and violence against the US government.
Jonathan, are you surprised at the extent of the membership of the Oath Keepers and other far-right groups who apparently, or maybe they do know, that the underpinnings of the philosophy of these groups are rooted in race and religion? In other words, they're against anybody who isn't white. And Jewish people obviously have a target on their backs based upon their philosophies. Does this surprise you at all that their membership is so diverse in a sense?
It somewhat does. I mean, look, right-wing extremism is the spectrum. We know that, Mike. And so there are white supremacists, there are sovereign citizens, and indeed, there are these armed militia groups. We know organizations like the Proud Boys, Tario, the head of it, is Hispanic. And indeed, there is some diversity among the Oath Keepers. But I think what's more frightening is the fact that they, for a long time, have prioritized recruiting active and retired law enforcement and military. We thought, Mike, they weren't being successful. We were wrong. We have a problem with an enemy inside our own ranks who has committed, as the Oath Keepers do, to uphold a higher oath, not to have fidelity to our commander-in-chief or necessarily to the jurisdictions where they work, but to their notion of the Constitution and a holy obligation that, again, puts minorities, puts Democrats, and puts ordinary citizens in their crosshairs.
CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, thank you very much for coming on this morning.
All right. So again, from the horse's mouth, as we pretty much been reiterating this whole show, this whole time we've had this channel, yeah, they're all in every level of this government. So again, why continue to support this government? Why continue to give your energy, your time, your resources into trying to change this government from the inside when they are already working how it's supposed to be? Like, they already have the actual cogs in their system to work how they need it to work. So the only way that we can actually break this system is to, one, stop supporting it and redirect our energy to have something to have in place of it once it does come down. And saying that, we'll go ahead and jump into our inventor for this week with Chief Alligator. Then after that, we'll go ahead with our Dr. Woodson quote from Chief Quietwater.
All right, let me see if I can share my screen real quick. Okay. Can y'all see?
Yep.
All right. So today's American inventor is going to be W.J. Ballow. He invented the combined hat rack and table. Patent number 601422, March 29th, 1898. He resided in Smith County, Tennessee. And his invention made improvements to hat racks, which is going to be figure 1 right here. Ironing table, figure 2. Lamp or candle stand, figure 3. And a vertical version of the stand is shown in figure 4. So this is a portable. He made a portable invention, and this disassembled can be assembled 4 different ways. And we do not have a birth date or a death date for this gentleman. The family or our group doesn't receive any percentage of income from this invention. But yeah, Mr. W.J. Ballo. He is the inventor of the hat rack, ironing board, lampstand, and vertical lampstand. That's this week's inventor.
Thank you, Chief Alligator. And next we'll have Chief Quietwater with this week's Dr. Woodson quote. Now go ahead and pull up that overview.
I got it here.
Got it there, okay.
So number one, I'm sorry, I'm going to do quote number one, actually. Philosophers have long conceded, however, that every man has 2 educators, that which is given him and that which he gives himself. Of the 2 kinds, that latter is by far more desirable. So basically, it's the way that I take it is that you can be fed information, or you can go and get the information and study and learn yourself, which is something that we have proven that we don't do since we've been doing this, these Sunday meetings, and you know, just learning through the process is a lot of information that we've been told that has not been true. So I think number one definitely resonates with us as a group.
Absolutely, absolutely. And great quote for this week. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and continue within the hearings. Last time we left off with this senior counselor, Stephen Greetham. And then looks like we're going to be jumping into the freedmen portion of this hearing.
Both Chickasaw citizens and, like me, non-citizens. It invests in communities throughout its reservation, Oklahoma, and the region. It is dynamic and its work is ongoing. It remains committed to this rebuilding effort, and it engages in it consistent with the law and its people's right to sovereign self-determination. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and thank you for the opportunity to start a conversation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Van, please proceed with your testimony.
Greetings, Chairman Schatz, Vice Chair Murkowski, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be a hearing witness. I am Marilyn Van, President of the Descendants of Freedmen of the 5 Tribes Association. I am a Cherokee citizen and a Freedman descendant. We support enforcement of 1866 treaty rights of Freedmen descendants. The tribes allied with the Confederate States to protect Black chattel slavery. The 1866 treaties ran at the Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole free and enslaved peoples and their descendants tribal citizenship rights. Choctaw freedmen were eventually adopted in 1885. Chickasaw freedmen were not members of the tribe at the time of the Dawes enrollment as per the federal courts. Many descendants today need services the same as their by-blood relatives. Poverty began of the freedmen during slavery. Later freedmen suffered from rape massacres, segregation, and redlining. Freedmen descendants disenrollment began in 1979. The freedmen, members of the tribes that were disenrolled, were not allowed to vote on the disenrollments or only in nominal numbers. Currently, only Cherokee Nation works to fulfill its treaty obligations to freedmen. As a result of past and current systemic racism, descendants need help of the senators. Some that need help include Creek Freedman descendant, Mr. Lovett of Okmulgee, a senior citizen on disability. He needs rental assistance. Can the tribes change without congressional and federal intervention? History says no. Cherokee Nation only came into compliance in 2017 after federal court decisions in Cherokee Nation v. Nash and Van and passage of Freedmen Protective Language in the 2008 Naacp Reauthorization Act. Even today, some council persons and candidates for tribal office run anti-freedmen rights campaigns. The Seminole Nation has worked to exclude freedmen descendants from receiving almost all services, even after losing the Seminole Nation v. Norton case, federal case in 2002, and receiving directions from the DOI and HUD that the freedmen citizens qualify for services. Their leadership has branded the freedmen as citizens rather than members, which legally means the same, and reissued freedmen tribal IDs that state 0 blood quantum and voting benefits only. The Seminole tribal government has told other tribal nations and federal agencies the freedmen citizens do not qualify for services. In October 2021, Seminole freedmen began receiving medical services after the IHS sends orders to all chiefs and tribally operated health units that the freedmen citizens qualify for the health services. This came after my visits to the Rockville IHS headquarters with Seminole Councilwoman Sampson, who is here today, requesting urgent help. The freedmen elders dying from COVID-19, such as Mr. Thomas, whose wife was on the council, was covered by the national press when tribal and IHS COVID vaccines were denied to Seminole freedmen, tribal citizens, but given to other members of the tribe. The Muscogee Creek Nation stresses the validity of Article 3 of its 1866 treaty, which confirmed the reservation, McGirt v. Oklahoma, but is silent on Article 2 of the same treaty that granted the enslaved people and their descendants the right to share in the national funds and all the rights of Indians. Article 2. Creek freedmen descendants went to tribal court, but have been waiting for a judge to be assigned to the case since February 2021. The Creek Nation issued $4,500 checks from COVID-19 funds to each by-blood citizens. Not a nickel went to the Creek freedmen, a clear violation of that treaty. By the way, the Seminole Nation leadership denied the freedmen citizens its share of the COVID funds as well. This committee can assist the freedmen. Here are some suggestions. We ask Congress to write legislation that includes freedmen descendants in appropriations, new programs, reauthorization of old programs or entitlements that benefit the nations. This must be done by congressional language. The DOI can register freedmen descendants, giving those that provide proof of descendancy of a Dawes enrollee a letter confirming the person is a treaty heir who qualifies for federal services. We request field hearings or local listening sessions to be held in Oklahoma by members and staff of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, so more voices can be heard. We ask for investigations of CRS reports on the Freedmen Treaty issues. These do not equate citizenship, but would be a start. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank all of our testifiers.
I'll go ahead and start off. First thing that kind of stood out to me was her saying that the tribes allied with Confederate states. We pretty much heard this this narrative be spoken by all of the members on this panel within the hearing. The document says that, these were pretend confederacies. So I guess my question would be, you're saying one thing, but your actual legal or lawful documents are saying another thing. There weren't Confederate states. We saw that within the Amnesty Proclamation. We saw that within, I believe we even saw that within the Emancipation Proclamation, but I know we at least saw it within 5 documents that we've pretty much read over throughout the few coming weeks, pretty much. And then my question would be, if we know that these are pretend confederacies, my question would be, who are they pretending to be? These, Europeans, these US citizens, they were pretending to be the Americans. And pretty much I can go ahead and cite to the Constitution that would pretty much go ahead and display that. Let me take a look here. And yeah, I'll definitely go ahead and pull that up as well. Let me move this out the way. But here, Article 1, Section 10 clearly states that no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation. Let me blow that up a little bit as well. So her initial statement just said that the Allied pretty much nations were pretty much allies with these Confederate states. But this government's own legal document, in which everything is founded upon, clearly states that no state shall enter into any confederacy. That's the whole point of why they said pretend confederacy, because they had already agreed that they could not join with the Americans in regards to this. And let me also go ahead and pull up that Amnesty Proclamation in addition with that Freedmen's Bureau. Because again, folks, we just highlighting the continued lies that are, again, just being reiterated by everyone. They're sticking to code. Even people that look like yourself and myself, they're sticking to code. So again, we have to pretty much stick to our own code and continue to call them out on this BS. So let me pull up the...
If you don't have it available, I can pull it up because I just pulled it up on my end. Do you have it?
Yeah, I just pulled it up.
Okay, cool.
If you have the Freedmen's one though, you can definitely pull that up. That way we can kind of jump to it a little quicker.
Okay.
All right, perfect. So this Amnesty Proclamation, again, highlights that pretend confederacy language. And now I'll go ahead, do a quick little fast find. All right, perfect. So in the first, I guess you could say, article or declaration, it states here, all who are or shall have been pretended civil or diplomatic officers or otherwise domestic or foreign agents of the pretended Confederate government. So again, why is Miss Mary Van, I believe, stating that these Confederate states allied with these nations? One, that would be false because they weren't the Confederate states. They weren't a confederacy at all. Again, this is coming from the commander-in-chief at that time, which is President Johnson, Andrew Johnson. Chief Quietwater, do you have that Freedmen's Bureau Act pulled up? And again, this is not just the only time this has been stated as far as them being a pretend Confederate government. They mentioned it multiple times within this one document, but multiple.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm
other
sorry.
documents as well.
Were you finished with that one?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Mhm. Perfect. Stop it a little bit. Mhm. And if you do like Control F and just type in pretend Confederacy, it should populate as well.
I don't believe that language is on that document. I wanted to use that document for one of the questions that I had based on what she said.
Got you. Okay.
Okay.
Just to add on to what you said though, can you go back to the Constitution real quick?
Definitely. Put that up real quick.
And the only reason we want to go back to the Constitution is based on the timeline. So you can't run it on us because everything's in order. So anything outside of order, it sticks out like a red thumb. This document was written in 1776, ratified in 1779. Can you go back to President Johnson's amnesty proclamation? So this Constitution precedes what President Johnson wrote. President Johnson write his document until what date?
So we got it right here. Very bottom. It should show May 29th. What is it, 1865?
Okay. So Constitution was written first. This president comes back a little over 100 years later, and he declares it to be a fake Confederacy. And that's prior to the 1866 Indian Treaty, which are what they're referring to in this hearing.
Correct. Correct.
You can keep building on your points. I just wanted to add that point.
Got you. Got you. Let me see here. But no, that was pretty much my my takeaway from that beginning part. She also mentioned, DOI. I believe we kind of looked it up before. Department of, it was either implementation or interior.
Interior, I think, Department of Interior. Mhm.
Again, just having to show that they need to go to another government. In this case, she's talking about, the rights of the freedmen. She was also discussing how they said that they would be able to share the funds. I know when we looked into the Chickasaw and Choctaw 1866 treaty, they specifically said that no, African descent, no freedmen were able to actually share in those funds. So that we have something that we would need to look into. But all in all, again, kind of as we just, play devil's advocate, none of this stuff is legit or valid, because what war even caused these people to be in this territory known as Oklahoma?
It's like they're really just trying to just throw anything at the wall, and what sticks, because it literally isn't making any sense. The more and more that we're listening to each of these representatives or counsel for these so-called tribes. I mean, and even she went on to say that 0% blood, I guess. So again, it's like it's open season for anyone that raises their hand that wants to try to be a part of these tribes with no rightful real way that they're able to prove that they are. So I definitely think that is just, they're all doing just basically continuing the lie. That's all that it just boils down to.
Correct. Yeah, any thoughts on the
Yeah, I got a couple of notes here based off this president of freedmen descendants. First note is what she's trying to do is she's trying to split this group up into citizens and by blood relatives. So this is the game they're playing. You can either be a citizen or you can be a by blood relative. We're going to get into that on my fourth point. My next point is 1979 disenrollment took place. So who disenrolled these quote unquote freedmen? But to answer that question, we got to get to the most important point that I heard. That the most important point that I'm coming up with based off what she said with all her lies is, let's find out who the freedmen are. So if you go to that Freedmen's Bureau Act, we need to find out who are the freedmen, because this is the president of freedmen descendants, and she claims to be representing freedmen. But what's interesting, can you do a search on this document for the word Negro, Black, colored, Afro-American? So why are we assuming that we are freedmen?
Mhm.
Nothing in this document points to the people that we've seen in these documents. We've seen Negro in the 1866 Indian Treaty, and we've also seen African descent person, right?
Mhm.
But you're telling us you got a melanated woman telling us that she represents freedmen, and she's trying to make it seem like they're us, but based on this document, it doesn't spell out that this act was for us. Are y'all in agreement with that?
Oh, yeah.
Agreed, yes.
Now, if we do look at this first paragraph, that sentence right after the first comma in the first sentence where it says that there is hereby established in the War Department. So what we got to understand is the people who are coming up under this act are coming through the War Department to continue during the present war of rebellion. Who's rebelling?
Right.
And for 1 year thereafter, a Bureau of Refugees. So they got a War Department, then they got a Bureau of Refugees. Freedmen and abandoned lands to which shall be committed as herein after provided the supervision and management of all abandoned lands and the control of all subjects relating to refugees and freedmen from rebel states. But your president says it's a fake Confederacy.
Mhm.
So who is this refugee and who is this freedman? Let's go back to the Constitution real quick. If we can go back to the Constitution real quick to the 13th Amendment. Because what we're doing is we're assuming that these documents and in this timeline that they reconstructed, this lie that they've taught us in school, we're assuming that it applies to us, but they're very accurate when they account for who's who.
Correct.
If they want to account for the Negro, they use the word Negro.
I also think as we get deeper and further along with these documents, they did kind of get a little sloppy with their language, which made it a little harder to cover up their lies. Like you said, Negro is not in that document. African American is not in that document. So I think that they just got a little bit more sloppier with the way that they tried to lie, basically.
And shoot, I would say even look at this date. Passed by Congress January 31st, 1865, ratified December 6th. So they passed it prior to these 1866 hearings. They ratified it prior to these 1866 hearings. They passed it prior to that amnesty proclamation that we just saw. So we're seeing the timeline. So we're going to come up with this group of people underneath this War Department from these rebel states, Confederate states, two different things. But we have Mary Van saying Confederate states, but documents are saying rebel states. But we're trying to, again, make them synonyms, make meaning like, they're the same thing when it's not the case. One is pretend, one doesn't exist. It's a rebellion, so they're naming them rebel states. Why is she calling them the Confederate states when we're looking at the Constitution and it's saying that no state can become a confederation? And I'll let you continue to build, though, that Chief Alligator. I just wanted to point that out there.
No, that's what we do. So Section 1, our biggest problem is, why do we consider ourselves to be this entity where it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction? Why do we just assume we're the slave? It's not specific, and it doesn't say the Negro or colored. So when you put yourself in that section on this 13th Amendment, it doesn't rhyme with the timeline, as you said, Chief Biko. Because we're showing you too many inventions and we're proving that there's an actual war going on at this time called the Gullah Wars, the Seminole Wars, whatever you want to classify it as. There's an unlawful war going on. So who would the United States government have control over? We got to think realistically. It's a colony. It's a small business. Them 13 colonies, them 13 initial states they had, they're not as big as what you think they are today. It's like we don't understand logic. When these people first got these first 13 states, they probably just had maybe 100 miles off the coastline. You see what I'm saying? But over time, the state of Georgia got bigger, and the state of North Carolina, South Carolina. In the beginning, they didn't have all this territory that you're giving them credit for. So who would they have absolute control over? The people that they were shipping over here. Who would be indebted to the United States government? The people that they paid the expense to get over here, the people from Europe. Those are the people they're going to tag when they put them on the ship and account for them. And they got to work that debt off to get back to a zero balance sheet before you can become a freedman. Somewhere along that timeline, they bucked. And they sided with us, who are the real Confederate. And their government is calling them out. You can't be a part of that. It's two separate businesses. The Iroquois Confederacy, the Creek Confederacy, that's a separate business from the United States government. The United States government is a separate business. That's how you have to look at history. Look at the United States government as a business, and look at these confederacies and these tribes as a separate business. What the United States government did in 1866 is it made entities. It took those tribes and made them nations so that it could go up under the United States government. Which goes to my my last point, where that president of the Freedmen descendants said they want U.S. Congress to write new language. Congress writes law for what business? The United States government. So if you were really your own quote unquote nation, why are you dependent on another government's lawful body that writes laws? Why are you relying on them to give you new language? Because it's a fake nation. This whole nation thing, everywhere they go and they institute nation, it's fake. That's why they can't have money. It can't be de jure because it's fake. We're so far out to lunch, we don't get that.
Dealing with make-believe entities where, again, attaching things that are, you would call like the natural being, to these terms that are just made up. We do it all the time with, U.S. citizen and American, thinking those are the same thing. We even do it in this document, slave, attaching people that look like us to mean that specific term. So that's a great point. Just wanted to kind of look at this next amendment and just, let's just take a look at these dates. Because in this next amendment, these are all pretty much what we would call, or what's considered, the Reconstruction amendments. So what the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment will all be pretty much considered Reconstruction amendments. So we see here passed June 13th, 1866, ratified July 9th, 1868. Then we also see here in this section the mentioning of Indians. The mention of Indians. So I just want to show this document because it's a treaty with the Choctaw and Chickasaw. Make sure I pull it up here. Let me take a look at this. So we see that this was, we're just going off the same type of thing, passed by Congress on, April 28th, 1866. That Amendment 14 was passed by Congress June 13th, 1866. This was ratified June 28th, 1866, and then just proclaimed June 10th, 1866. While that 14th Amendment was ratified July 9th, 1868. So we're looking at the timeline of how they're just piecing things together, coming up with these different terms, Indians, what is this, Negro, and we already highlighted how they were able to just adopt anybody to become a part of said nation. So what we're doing right now is just painting the picture of how pretty much these 3 amendments, how they're trying to make them so broad where they can just put anybody within them. And then we're going to teach a story in these schools, aka brainwashing camps, to make you fit a particular character within the story. That's all that is all that is going on right now.
Can you go back to the Freedmen's Bureau Act real quick?
Yeah.
I believe that's 1865, correct?
Pull it up here. I think this is here. Yep, March 3rd, 1865.
So these Europeans came up under the War Department for rebelling against their government, the United States government. And now, based on these testimonies and these hearings, the United States government is going to say, hey, take our prisoners of war that rebelled, right? Because they created a Bureau of Refugees within the War Department of the United States government, sent these people out into Indian Territory and basically told that 15,000, that small group that they were able to push west of the Mississippi, hey, you adopt these prisoners of war into your new nation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 150 years later, you got these people who were adopted in some kind of way, their citizenship supersedes blood relative.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're saying is the freedmen are the European that rebelled against their own government during the Seminole Wars. Those people were put up under the War Department, under the Bureau of Refugees, and they were sent west of the Mississippi River. And they were adopted into these fake nations. We can call them fake nations because this land didn't have nations. Tribes made up confederacies. So the fact that it has to be a nation because it has to be a corporate fiction. That's the only way it can communicate with the United States government, because they're make-believe governments. So I think we tied this in pretty well. I think there's some other language in here about 40 acres and a mule in this document as well, correct? I know it's in the Special Order 15.
Yes, let me see. I think they do speak on certain acres. Yes.
Yeah, 40 acres.
More than 40 acres of such land.
Right. So we got 2 different documents talking about 40 acres. You got General Sherman in the what we know now as Georgia area. Again, a general can't give you anything, but he was talking about 40 acres. And then you got this document talking about 40 acres. But what we know is who actually got the land, the Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got even more land through the Homestead Act.
Correct. Up to 160 acres. To 160. So yes, again, just the optics of everything. Let's get a, what appears to be, let's get a Black woman to speak on behalf of, the freedmen, even though we know from our documents, the freedman is the European. But just to continue with our narrative, let's make sure we put a Black woman in front of you all for this hearing. That way you can connect, say, okay, she's speaking on behalf of us, when in actuality, she's not. In actuality, she's not.
And it's pretty much fast forward to today, how, at first the minorities were us Americans. Now it's under the umbrella of so many different other groups of people. And now typically the spokesperson or the spokespeople for the minorities right now on this land is the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. So it's the same story. Really, nothing has changed.
Correct. All just umbrella titles, pretty much. We're going to actually, since we have some more time, kind of see where else we can get to. See who's next here.
Really extraordinary testimony. All of you deeply professional, deeply knowledgeable, obviously not in agreement. some intense frustration expressed. I respect that. These issues, as I said before, are foundational to people's identity, to communities, to tribal identity. And so I just wanted to acknowledge the professionalism with which you all delivered your testimony. I'll start with Mr. Newland. I understand the department is currently gathering data related to freedmen eligibility for certain federal benefits. Can you just talk a little bit more about what's going on in that process and how it's coming along?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So as I mentioned in my testimony, we had conducted consultation, formal government-to-government consultation with 5 tribes back in February. We received, in addition to sitting down and having a conversation on some of these same issues, we received comments. And the question was whether to admit non-tribal member freedmen descendants as students at Haskell and SIPI. One of the challenges with that is that the BI is not currently set up in a way where we have the capacity to make determinations about who would and would not be eligible. We typically rely upon tribal governments for membership and citizenship questions. And so we haven't yet decided on definitively on a course of action coming out of that consultation, but those are some of the issues that we were considering.
So I'm sort of assuming you can't answer this question, but based on the data that you're gathering so far, do we have a ballpark number of how many freedmen descendants have equities across the 5 tribes?
I don't have that number, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There's been talk, Ms. Van's testimony talked about a CRS report. There's been talk among staffers about a GAO report, and just cards on the table as I'm thinking about the path forward. That strikes me as an important first step, just to sort of set a baseline of how each of the 5 tribes are in a different situation, both in terms of their treaty obligations, but also their current view of the issue and where they may or may not be in pending litigation. But also some baseline data about how many people are we talking about, right? What percentage of the current roles would this constitute? What kind of resource requirements would that implicate? And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are about a GAO report to try to get a level set here about the history, the legal aspects, the mechanics of conducting a role. I know something about this from the Native Hawaiian community, that, the blood quantum questions, the lineal descendancy, they're not so easy to settle. And so even before you get to the potential for public policy in this space, you need to know what the facts are. And so I'm wondering what you think about that.
Mr. Chairman, we would be happy to work with the committee to and better understand kind of how that study would be set up. But you hit the nail on the head that simple descendancy does not, in and of itself, doesn't necessarily mean that somebody would be an eligible freedman descendant, because each tribe has slightly different citizenship requirements. And so the short answer to your question is we'd be happy to continue those conversations to look at how we would better define the universe here.
My final question before I turn it over to Vice Chair Murkowski, and I'll do a second round to try to ask some additional questions. Chief Hoskin, you testified that the nation has approved and processed just under 12,000 citizenship requests. Do you have an idea of, was it an initial rush and now you just have a few coming in the sort of regular order, or are there a lot of requests still pending for processing? How is this working?
There was an initial rush because of the obvious news of the court decision and how we embraced it. But the number has grown steadily. So when I testified before a House committee earlier this year, we were somewhere in the neighborhood of the 8,000 range. And so that gives you an idea. Now we're closing in on 12,000. Now we are the largest tribe by population in the United States, coming on to 440,000 citizens in that neighborhood. I think as we go out and engage in our outreach, Mr. Chairman, we are encouraging more people to sign up And it's a rigorous process, and it should be, but we're doing outreach, and I think that's why you see our numbers continue to grow. I don't know what the ceiling is, and I don't know right now, although we can get the committee this information, what our pending applications are. But we process thousands of applications for citizenship every month for Cherokee, potential Cherokee citizens of all sorts of descent, including Cherokee by blood and freedmen. So I think that number is just going to continue to grow.
And just before I turn it over to Vice Chair Murkowski, just for the other representatives of the tribes, whether over the table or in subsequent correspondence, I am going to try to get some fidelity on how many people we're talking about for each of your tribes and what percentage of your current membership that may comprise. I understand that is sometimes sensitive information, given that you are sovereigns. And so I want to be respectful of that. But I also think for decision-making purposes, we need to sort of understand not just the legal and moral and historical implications, but how many people are we talking about? And if it is a resource question, what it would cost to address. So just to let you know, those questions are coming, and I'm sensitive to the idea that maybe you don't want to give me incredible precision with a microphone on. Vice Chair Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to begin with a question to you, Assistant Secretary Newland. When Secretary Holland approved the Cherokee Nation's new constitution guaranteeing full citizenship, she did state very clearly, tribal self-governance is the best path forward to resolving internal tribal conflicts. We encourage other tribes to take similar steps. But as we have heard very clearly today, the treaties that the 5 tribes are under are very different, and therefore the obligations to the freedmen and their descendants are at question here, of course. So the question to you is, if the tribes treaty does not require it to extend membership to freedmen, what federal obligations does the federal government have to the freedmen and to their descendants? And I guess a follow-on to that would be if there are any administrative authorities that the Department of Interior possesses that could be utilized to address the concerns. You indicated that consultation has been underway, and discussions about BIE and BIA, and the department has not determined yet how to move forward. But can you speak again to the federal obligation and also to potential administrative authorities?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. Are you asking if a freedman descendant does not have a legal right to tribal citizenship, at that point, what would the United States obligation
Correct.
be?
What would the obligation be then to the freedmen and to their descendants?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. If there's no legal right to tribal citizenship, it's not clear then that the United States would have a trust duty to any individual as though they were Indian or as though they were a tribal citizen.
And so what about any administrative authorities within the department to address some of the concerns that we have heard articulated today?
Thank you, Vice Chair. You know, this has been a difficult question for us to answer. I know some folks here in the room have views that these questions are clear, the answers are clear on their face, but in terms of how we would administer direct services to freedmen descendants, again, it's very difficult for us to put that into practice through the BIA because we're simply not set up or not constituted right now to make determinations about who would be a lawful or legitimate freedman descendant entitled to those services and who would not be. And so I guess the answer to your question is it's just not clear today what administrative capabilities we would have.
So let me ask yet probably another hard question.
Stop there. Definitely took some notes here just in regards to before we kind of got to this point. Just seems again that the speakers pretty much aren't in agreement of who is who and who's supposed to get what. I say who is who because we just identified who the freedmen were. They were the Europeans, but now we're seeing that these same Europeans are the ones that are pretty much leading this hearing. They're now, the chiefs and heads of chiefs, and now are dictating about who these non-tribal member freedmen are, and if they can actually get access to these specific nations. So it seems like an identity crisis is what is really occurring just in regards to the hearing. Because as we stated before, we have a quote unquote Black woman representing the freedmen, but our documents just clearly highlighted who the actual freedmen were. Europeans from, or refugee Europeans from the rebel states coming up underneath the War Department. Whose war? Again, the Europeans up underneath this United States government. So that's just kind of is like the most obvious, but also confusing part seems for me at least in regards to these hearings.
I definitely agree about it being confusing. It's like this lady here is trying to have some type of segue to make the other guy, I can't remember what his name, Newland, to figure out how can we basically squeeze our way in to these fake nations or whatever without having the qualifying whatever their criteria is to actually be a part of it. I think it sounds more like a campaign for them trying to basically make it fit to what they need for them to actually get into these groups or whatever. I think that, let me see, what else did I put? Yeah, it's just all BS. I mean, really, it's just all BS in regards to this lady. She's basically just trying to find a loophole of how she can get her folks in.
Yeah, because even with that, like they discuss about, sovereign, you're sovereign, so you may not want to speak on these certain things, but you're also at the same time asking how can the federal government enforce a treaty on a supposedly sovereign nation.
Yeah.
So you see what I'm saying? Like you're asking, if they're sovereign, they're supposed to have absolute power to dictate what they want to do in that nation. But you're saying, okay, and that's the question that she seems to be asking that chief, what are some steps that the federal government can do to make sure that these non-tribal member freedmen can be implemented?
And they really can't do anything. I mean, they're probably just going to rewrite some of the language to make it work in their favor.
And that's what kind of stood out to me with that Cherokee chief, because he even stated that the potential of all sorts of descendants. So again, just kind of reiterating back to that point of adoption. He read off some numbers, 8,000, and now it's close to that 12,000 mark. But he definitely said that we would be able to, take on other, descendants as well, other sorts of descendants, and he kind of referencing, whether it be blood or, just citizenship.
Right.
So just pretty much now it's a club.
Exactly.
Of it actually being traced back to actual lineage. Any thoughts there, Chief Alligator?
Yeah, y'all hit on a lot of the points that I had written down. The gentleman that this lady is speaking to, his title is the Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So he's speaking on behalf of entity that the U.S. government created.
Yeah.
U.S. government puts their own employees within that Bureau of Indian Affairs. But the overall umbrella, both of y'all touched on it. We're not in control of this matter. Europeans are. This is the root of the problem. It's our shit, all these inventions, the land and everything, but you're not in the room. You got a bunch of Europeans talking about what percentage of your current DAWS rolls has freedmen on it. The fact that you're even letting these people, when you own and control something, you don't have to listen to what nobody says. And it's just weird how it's our shit, but we got people who come from nothing playing this game with us as if they're managing our lives. When all we got to do is just stand up and just shoehorn our way into the room and tell the truth. That's ultimately what I'm getting from this is what happens when you don't own and control something. People can play games with you, and people, you know, they're playing games with our group of people. They're masquerading around with your name. They're making percentages of income off your inventions, and they're reaping percentages of income off the resources that come out of your land. That's what it's going to take for us to realize that. I don't know. But that's what I'm seeing. Lack of power, because you are the owner. You're not even in the room. This lady that's acting as president of the Freedmen Descendants, she's an employee. She's an employee of an agency. That lady has no more power than any employee of any other entity. There's somebody above her. Or in this case, it may be a board. If she's the president, there may be a board of trustees that have to vote periodically on who's going to be the figurehead. You see what I'm saying? But ultimately, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is acting as treasurer. That's why this lady is asking that assistant secretary, you know, hey, do you know how big the role is? You know, do you know what kind of allotments can possibly go out? But again, you got the only way out of this, man, is just to wreck shop. You got to just force your way into the room, because they're basically playing with us right now. You got Europeans in here that were adopted into these fake nations, and they're sitting over here talking around us.
Yeah.
Because we're not even being brought up. The vast majority of us are east of the Mississippi River. We're not even being brought up. They're just talking about the small percentage that they're tagging as freedmen. They've even traded places with those people. So this whole idea that they're going to talk about membership and citizenship, how can she even ask these questions when you were adopted into it? Your opinion don't even count. You were adopted into it. You're not even real.
Yes.
But here they are now, fake running shit. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. But that's what I see. We don't know what it's like to own and control anything. And so we let a lot of shit slide. Ultimately, the highest disrespect you can do is kill people. And so that's what they're doing to us now. They're actually killing us, mass incarcerating and killing us. And we just have nothing to say about it at this point.
Agreed.
I think that's a drop the mic moment right there. Because yeah, people masquerading as us, again, talking around us, but not addressing who we are, especially in regards to this equation, basically. Yeah, we are the Americans, but they're using our traditional names in these hearings to discuss about how we can bring about more people to use you all's names, pretty much. Do we have enough funding, different resources? And Chief Alligator stated, you can hear everybody's an employee. They're getting dictated to, they aren't dictating things. So yeah, next week should be close to finishing this off. Probably will finish this off on the last pretty much day of the fiscal quarter or week of the fiscal quarter before heading into the fourth fiscal quarter. So yeah, almost finished with this one. And then after that, we'll be jumping into another thing. But again, people, have your own research, again, you can see the blatant lies that they're saying. Obviously trading places with the freedmen to move up and to become now a part of these nations, then having the freedmen be replaced by another group of people. It's not only in regards to just this small demographic per se, we're seeing it, you know, as Chief Quietwater alluded to, people east of the Mississippi as well. Minorities are now who pretty much anything that you can think of, just a native person. So we'll leave it at that, and next week we'll jump back into it.
Tie one more thing into it, Chief Biko. Tie us into it, because we're talking about freedmen today, but talk about people, the prisoners of war, the people that were declassified from Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek. This group of people, let's put the 5 tribes aside for a second. We rely on another group of people to tell us what law is going to be.
Correct.
That's a problem. The fact that you're waiting on European employees of the United States government. Oh, some legislation just came out. We can't even understand that you can create your own. You can create your own structure, your own policies, your own procedures, and really run shit. But we can't even tap back into we can't tap back into that spirit to understand that it's our shit.
Right.
You know, you're never going to win when you're relying on somebody else to create the structure for you.
Correct.
Whether it's reparations or, like right now, they're talking about, I don't know if y'all paid attention to it, but Trump did a rally last night. He's talking about, if he becomes president, giving more money to police. So it really boils down to, we don't know the difference between reform and revolution.
Correct.
Reform is trying to get along at your job.
Right.
You don't get fired. I done been written up, I done been suspended. All right, let me bring my ass in on time. So let me reform. Revolution is, I'm gonna create my own shit and do what the fuck I want to do.
Correct.
We're not there mentally. We're not ready to have a revolution. That means that we take their constitution and tear that shit up and be like, no, we're gonna write our own documents.
And you know, for some reason we think it's so hard, but as I remember Chief Quietwater saying this very beginning of when we started the actual channel, when we was actually the Militia Act, like we could do the same thing. Constitution, it was 36 people that signed it, just the people, those are the people. Why do we think it's something so difficult or so, you know, beyond the scope of, you know, our abilities to actually do? We have so many business owners.
It is hard, Chief Biko. You know why it's hard? To be honest with you.
What's that?
The only reason that we the people or anybody can create their own structure and their own everything, you gotta have wealth. Wealth equals time. It gives you time to think and strategize. You understand? That's the hard part for us. We're not in a position as a group of people to actually take time to come up, to think and grow rich. Our backs, you know what I'm saying? It is hard. It is.
When you go wealth, I want you to kind of like put a definition on it, because I don't want the viewer to think wealth is this fiat, because we obviously know that's backed by nothing. It's worthless. It's wealthless. So we come up when you say like wealth, like kind of speak on what you mean by that, like resources. Like we don't have an industry full of farming industry, so we could say, okay, well, we know we have food that we can rely on, so we can actually chill back. We know we have shelter in place if you needed to come and again have that time to think and grow rich. So just kind of wanted you to, what is your definition of that, like wealth?
It's not my definition. The definition of wealthy people. We're the largest consumer group under the United States government as citizens. By financial definition, that means we're the poorest group of people because we spend more than we make. So we're just talking financial literacy. Wealth is measured in time, not currency. So you have to look at how much time could go by with nothing coming in. That would allow you to do things that normal people can't do. You see what I'm saying? You become a part of the 10%. What's a good example? Court. You can't go to court without currency. You see what I'm saying? And if you don't want to spend your currency, then that means you got to have time on your side to represent yourself. And so our problem is we're financially illiterate. We can't afford to take time to think, to come up with something. You know, we get dictated to by everybody else's rhythm. We don't know how to just disconnect, sit down, put yourself in a position of power. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's weird how that works, because when you really have power, then you don't wield that sword every day. You see what I'm saying? You walk light, but you carry a big stick. You know, you don't want to let people know that the buck stops here. But if it gets put in that position, if you get put in that situation, you can let them know. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And we're completely dependent on this group of people. The fact that you're asking them for reparations. That's why the steps say boycott, because you're broke. There's nothing else you can do but stop spending your money first. That's the only power you got right now. Is maybe you need to see how powerful you are. Just stop spending your money. That in itself will give you a little bit of self-esteem. So that's what the We the People did. Though that We the People, they had their peasants coming from Europe, working as indentured servants, working on the land, learning from the Americans, how to pick cotton, how to grow corn, how to be a blacksmith. That allowed them to sit in Philadelphia for a couple of weeks and write up a constitution. You can't write out operating procedures unless you got time. So it doesn't necessarily have to be what we think is money. It could be popcorn. It doesn't matter what the tangible thing that we're holding in our hand is considered to be money. It's the principle that you have to accumulate enough. You don't look at it. You get to a place where you're not looking at dollar amount anymore. You're looking at time.
How much time do I have to do something?
And that's a different being. That's a different reality. And we're not there, but we can get there in 13 weeks. I will invest on that and say, if we sat down for 13 weeks, we would see all these other groups of people start to collapse around us. And then that would give us the power to be like, yeah, these people really are eating off us. We can't stop long enough
to even see it.
That's nigga culture.
Yeah.
That's so we can be weird, which is what all these other groups are. Right? The European, the Asian, the Russian, they're all weird. What do I mean by weird? They all have time on their side. They can strategize. They can put together militaries. They can plan defenses. We don't have none of that.
Normal's being broke, paycheck to paycheck.
So we go from crisis to crisis, like right now with the Anti-Defamation League. We can all close it out on this, just tying it in to we have no wealth and we have no power. None of your nonprofit organizations said anything this week. After it's been a week since that man made that declaration. Your Black Caucus hasn't said anything. Your Negro League, your Urban League, your NAACP, none of your preachers. I don't care if you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish. Why is nobody saying nothing?
And it's sad that the majority of the group of us are not even expecting them to even say anything, or putting that fire behind them. Like, what's up? Like, what's this about? You know what I'm saying? I just, like I said last week, I just think that that particular thing has went over everyone's head. But I'm sure the Congressional Black Caucus, people that know, they know, but they still remain quiet. And for whatever reason.
It's kind of piggyback off of that. And like I said, close it out. Shoot, those are supposed to be our representatives that have the most time to think about these issues.
Right.
If we're the ones, working can't stop to focus on anything, then they're supposed to be the ones that can.
It's supposed to be
Like
working
you
for
stated,
us, right?
working for us. So having those, okay, well, we need to be writing up something to have for our own. So again, it just shows that mindset as well.
They're still employees, Chief Eco. Don't forget that.
I'm about to say they're still employees, so it's like, okay, we can give you busy work too. Or just have you focus on anything besides what needs to be focused on.
It's about benefits and their income and their salary. It's so if we compare the We the People to our Black Caucus, that's a different group. That We the People were wealthy.
Right.
That's why those initial people got hundreds of acres of land. This Black Caucus don't have hundreds of acres of land. They get them niggas a federal car. You know what I'm saying? Like the little trinkets that they get, it's not power.
Right.
So I'm gonna use Donald Trump as an example. In my last comment, I respect Donald Trump for one reason. One of his first interviews when he became president, he said, "I'm not going to take the salary of the president."
He's what?
Owner mentality. He never took a salary to be president.
Oh, okay.
He's the only one to ever do that. That's a different mentality than a Negro in your Black Caucus. That's, girl, if you get this position, you're going to make $150,000 a year. They're going to give you a BMW and expensive. So you look at that like you better than the rest of your people, when in reality, you ain't got no power. That's why Trump can let his nuts hang and do what he wants and say what he wants. Why? You don't have any power over me. I'm not your employee. I'm doing this shit as service work. That's why I can say whatever the fuck I want to say.
It's a different spirit.
It's a So to beat this system, you can't work in it. You can't.
Yeah.
How many times have you worked somewhere and y'all tried to organize and you be the one to get fired? Because everybody want that job. So we have to transcend above that. I don't know what it's going to take for us to do it. But shout out to Donald Trump, man. And I hope he comes back as president. I'm not voting for him, but niggas need a wake-up call. Niggas need another 4 years of Trump. Because you done fucked around and let 2 years of Biden go by and you got nothing. And when Trump come back, he finna double down on everything that you cried about in 2020.
And what was the thing? We got one positive group to come out of that whole Trump tenure. And now we've let that go to the wayside in regards to NFAC, Grandmaster Jay. It's the only time people were beginning to wake up.
Right.
Like you stated, Chief Alligator maybe needs that part two to spark that light within a lot of our people.
What's that?
That light to fight, that willingness to actually make some changes going on.
He actually fucked up. Because he had an employee mindset. Yeah, Grandmaster Jay fucked up because he had an employee mindset. You can't talk that talk and not walk that walk. When they locked you up on them bogus charges the very first time, you were supposed to, whatever you got going on, you were supposed to let the dogs loose. And when you didn't let the dogs loose, that's when the United States government knew you popping. You popping. And so let that be a lesson learned to us. When you step out there like that, you got to teach people how to treat you.
Thanks.
NFAC never taught the United States government how to treat them. Yeah, they went out and didn't get shot on the events that they went out there. But when they went and wrote him off on that bullshit charge and nothing happened after that, and now he's in jail waiting to be sentenced and nothing's happening, the only way you're going to get straightened is what you saw in 2020.
Yeah.
You got to tear shit up. Chief Quietwater, you want to close out saying anything?
I agree with everything that you guys said.
That's good.